It used to be a deeply kept secret, and the victims could have been anyone. Over the last 50 years, the crime of sexual assault has come out of the shadows and is being discussed and hopefully addressed. I emphasize hopefully because the more we find out of it, unfortunately, the more commonplace it seems. Can we stop sexual assault from happening? How can we get the victims the help and support they need? And are we doing enough? Sexual assault in Coles County on this week's edition of At Issue. Thank you for joining us today on At Issue. I'm Fred Peralta. As a father of both a young man and a young woman who graduated from Eastern, I'll be honest with you, I didn't worry about my son, and I did worry about my daughter. The idea that a young woman could find themselves in a difficult situation especially scared me, since I realized that many of my previous conceptions were old-fashioned and patronizing. Here today to help me better understand the issue and get over my patronization is Jeanie Ludlow, a PhD from the EIU Women's Studies Department, and Donna Hudson, the adult counselor at SACIS, the Sexual Assault and Counseling Service. And thank you for joining me today, ladies.
Thank you.
The issue of sexual assault is a big one, and it's tough to get my hands around it. Maybe we should start first with, what is sexual assault today? What do we consider sexual assault?
Well, that's a really good question because definitions change from state to state. Mm-hmm. In the state of Illinois, sexual assault is defined as the penetration of one person's body, either orally, anally, or vaginally, by another person without consent.
So it doesn't have to be intercourse, it could be all sorts of other things.
It can be, and it's really about the penetration of the body.
Okay.
And it's important to say too that without consent means both, it can mean with force, but it could also mean coercion. Mm-hmm. And it could mean a situation where the victim is unable to give legal consent, say is so intoxicated that he or she cannot consent, is under the influence of medication or something and unable to give consent.
Donna, that seems like a pretty broad issue, and I'm imagining lots of different scenarios where things could spiral out of control. How have we treated sexual assault in the past, and how are we treating it now?
Well, sexual assault is very pervasive in the culture, partly because there are tremendous stereotypes that still persist, that even though there have been so many strides forward for women in our culture, there still are some very rigid stereotypes that persist that enable us and I think cause us to think of women as objects. There's a sense in which it seems like women are damned if they do and damned if they don't. If a woman likes sex, that's not okay. If a woman doesn't like sex, that's also not okay. So in any kind of situation where men and women are meeting, hooking up, whatever that may be, I think the assumption oftentimes on the part of the men involved is that there's going to have to be some pressure for that woman to say yes, and that no doesn't really mean no.
I was going to say, so no doesn't mean no? You
right.
didn't.
It does mean no. It should mean no. It absolutely should mean no.
Right.
A woman shouldn't have to even say no. The man should say, how about this? What do you think?
So you deal with a lot of young women, the women who are growing into their sexuality, and how are they conflicted about what's going on here as far as how to deal with, you say, sexually wanting to participate and yet not wanting to participate with everybody?
I think both men and women are victims of rape culture. And I don't mean just in the sense that men can also be victims of rape, which they are. But I think men and women also are all victimized by that sense of the sexual stereotypes that go on, by the pressure to have sex.
You mentioned rape culture. Just talk about that for a second. What is rape culture?
Rape culture is what we call it because in our society today, we tend to see sexuality as something that happens most appropriately when people feel forced or rushed into something. If you think about advertising, for instance, beer ads, it's always either this hypersexualization of both the men and the women, everybody's wanting it all the time, or which is kind of pornographication of our culture, or it's a situation where the men are enticing the women, coercing the women, pushing the women into sexuality, and that's rape culture. That we don't teach our young people today that sexuality is a normal, healthy, positive form of communication and sharing between people that we should all value and honor.
That definition you gave, that definitely changed from the 50s and 60s.
Sure.
I mean, where it was the young man's goal to ask and the young woman's goal, purpose to say no. So are we better than that these days? Have we matured, or are we still there?
We're different. But I don't know that what we are now is better.
Okay.
I grew up in the 70s, and I consider the 70s sort of this much better time period. We had really good sex education. I came out of high school knowing a lot more than my students come out of high school knowing about sex and sexuality today. My parents were very open with us about sex and sexuality issues, and my friends' parents were too. I think today, we have moved backwards a little bit into this sense that sex is something to be ashamed of or ashamed about. And that shame layers on top of this idea of pornographication or rape culture, and just makes it much harder for young people to have open communication.
So we have very muddled views of sex and sexuality, of asking and receiving permission. What is there a common theme in sexual assault that you see in the people who come?
I think many people would be surprised to learn that a great number of our victims a great number of our clients are people who were victimized sexually when they were children growing up.
Really?
The pervasiveness of childhood sexual abuse is just enormous. In fact, you mentioned that I'm the adult counselor on staff. We have one adult counselor, we have two children's counselors on staff who see children from the ages of 3 to 17. And many of those children are seen in school. Most of those children are being victimized by people that they know, trusted family members. So a lot of the clients that we see are adults who are still dealing with the fallout of childhood sexual assault. Many of those people are people who have then again been victimized as they become adults. When you're abused as a young child, your self-esteem, your views about the world and about yourself are greatly affected, and it's very common for people who have a childhood experience of sexual assault to go on and engage in a lot of risky behavior. They don't feel worthwhile as human beings. They feel damaged already, so it just leads to more and more alcohol abuse. A lot of behaviors also that are attempts to avoid the pain of dealing with sexual assault can then turn into risky behavior. So as I say, I think you'd be surprised. We're not so much dealing with, we have many people who come because of a recent sexual assault that happened when they were an adult, but much of it happens in childhood. A theme, I guess, that I would also see that's very pervasive is that most of the time the perpetrator is someone who is known to the victim. Sure. So, as I said, in the cases of children, it's a trusted adult or older adolescent child. In the cases of people on the campus here, it's somebody that they've met, maybe a roommate's friend or boyfriend, maybe somebody that they know through another friend, maybe even a boyfriend or a former boyfriend who is the perpetrator. And this, you might be asking us in a little bit, and I could be jumping the gun talking about reporting.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, in the research we did here at the station, there is one reported case of sexual assault out in the community. And I understand from the information we've gotten from you folks that you had 5 reported cases of sexual assault. So
you're talking about on campus.
On campus. Okay.
Since
well,
the first
5
year.
is more than one. And why are the victims not taking the next step to go to the authorities to proceed with the legal actions?
Well, it's You know, it's very difficult when you've been sexually assaulted by somebody that you knew and trusted. The first instinct is not, I've got to go report this to the police. The first instinct is to say, what happened here? How did this happen to me? I'm not even sure that I would call it rape. Something happened that I didn't want to have happen, and it happened at the hands of somebody that I knew and trusted. So there's oftentimes a lengthy period of self-doubt and confusion and an attempt to try to just bury it somewhere. And that period of time can last for years.
So they feel the victim is taking responsibility for the act sometimes?
It's surprising how often we see that guilt and shame are a part of what victims are dealing with. I know you see that in the people you talk to.
All the time. I have had since, you know, we've had some issues come up on campus around sexual assault just this semester, and since that has happened, 7 students have come to me individually to tell me their stories. And some of them made reports and some did not. And some of their situations happened just in the last few weeks, and some happened last year or the year before. But all of these students, the thing that they had in common is what they needed to hear from me was, it's not your fault. You did not do this. You did not make the decision that was wrong. The person who made the decision to assault is the person who's done the wrong thing, and the person who was assaulted is not. And that's part of rape culture, right?
Right. Now, with the story about the young football players in Steubenville, Ohio, many of the community is saying, you know, you're ruining this young man's future. You know, he could be a college, you know. I'm not hearing the same concern about the young lady. And what are, I mean, is it a fear of acting for shame, or is it a fear of acting because you're going to ruin somebody else's life? Is it a fear of...
Think about the assumptions that go along with that. I think the assumptions that are not being spoken aloud are that the men somehow couldn't help it, and it was the woman's job to make sure it didn't happen.
No, me, no.
Right. She shouldn't even have to say, no victim should be the one who had to put a stop to it. There were choices to be made, and a choice to stop that behavior could have been made at any moment throughout the entire process. I've tried not to watch some of those YouTube videos because they're painful for me to watch.
I purposely not watched them as a father.
These, exactly. These are groups of people. There are, you know, at any point in time, the people who are doing this act or the bystanders who are watching it could have put a stop to it.
Now, that leads to a question of, is a group, is an audience amplifying these sorts of behaviors, or is it just a one-on-one, or alcohol obviously plays a part in many of these?
One aspect of rape culture is that it comes to us because of our culture's high investment in very strict gender roles. This is what masculinity means, and this is what femininity means, and we have to stay in those boxes, right? Part of masculinity, as you probably know much better than we do, part of masculinity is proving oneself to be masculine to other men. And that happens, it can happen on the sports field, it can happen in the boardroom, it can happen in the classroom, and it happens in...
It's the alpha dog thing.
In situations of sexual assault and sexual abuse as well. That one of the things that we see happening when young men are involved, like in the Steubenville case with more than one young man involved, is that there is an amplification through this sort of peer pressure to be the macho one, to be the masculine one, who doesn't back down when something isn't right.
Well, not to pick on those gentlemen from Steubenville, but then to brag about it is, you know, with the video and the photographs and that sort of thing, just unimaginable to me. Why would you take an intimate moment and spread it out over the internet? I don't understand.
Well, I think it's two things. I think it's what Jeanie is saying about that tremendous need to prove yourself as a man, and also the belief that this human being that you're enacting this behavior on really doesn't qualify as a human being, as a person with feelings and rights of her own.
Now, we're jumping around a little bit, but that dehumanizing of the victim, there are sexual assaults by people who you know, and there are sexual assaults by unknown parties.
Strangers.
You know, is that dehumanization involved in both of those cases?
Absolutely. It absolutely is. Sexual assault by someone known to the victim happens in a situation where the victimized person says, this is not what I want, in some way. I mean, it doesn't have to be those exact words, right? It can be hand gestures, it can be turning away, it can be freezing up, it can be crying, whatever. But there is a clear indication, this is not what I want, and the other person makes a conscious decision to go ahead and do it anyway. You can't do that to someone unless you're in some way dehumanizing them.
Okay, so on campus, how are we beginning to help the victims? How are we starting to talk about it more? What can we do to help minimize the impulse of some to commit these crimes, and how can we go about, first of all, giving young women permission to protect themselves, and secondly, or I guess young women and young men,
Yes.
but also, what do we do afterwards to help them? Maybe you can address that one.
Well, I think one thing that I hope is changing, at least is changing in the social media that I'm seeing, is that over the years, you said you grew up in the 70s and so did I, and when I was in college in the 80s, all of the anti-rape tips were aimed at women. All the things that women should not do.
Oh, don't wear clothes, don't
Right,
walk
don't
by
walk
yourself
alone,
at dark. And,
right, and all of those kinds of things. These are all things. And again, the assumption was there isn't anything we can do to get men to stop raping women. So we just need to make sure that you as a woman don't walk into a bad situation. And really, if you've done that sort of thing, then you have only yourself to blame for being raped. Right. And finally, very slowly, I mean, it's ridiculous that it's taken this long, but now we're seeing almost in jest these 10 tips to prevent rape that are they're aimed at men. And that's where a lot of the education really does need to be focusing on what men can do to stop rape, not only in terms of understanding and seeing women as human beings who are equally as much of value as they are, but also for the men who are hearing the kinds of behavior and seeing the kinds of behavior of their friends and classmates and whatever, to say, that's really not okay. That kind of thing that you're planning to do or that you are doing is not okay.
So you believe that it actually is a conscious decision by somebody rather than an impulse or opportunity.
At SACIS, we are at this point reading and talking about recent research out of the University of Massachusetts, which is suggesting that idea that the date rape is a situation that's simply gotten out of hand really isn't true.
Okay.
Since most of the acquaintance and date rapes don't get reported, the research on rapists in prison is really not especially valid because it's mostly these sort of undetected rapists who we don't know very much about. But the research out of the University of Massachusetts is suggesting that these are guys who are exactly fitting the profile that Jeanie was describing earlier. Guys who want to feel a need to prove their masculinity, and they are aggressive sexually. Okay, so they want to have sex, and they want to have sex often, and they will do it whether somebody consents or whether somebody doesn't. So they go to a party and they're planning before the night is over, I'm going to have sex. Yes. It's not the idea that I wasn't thinking about it until we started fooling around, and now I just can't seem to stop myself.
Okay, so it's not that crime of opportunity. It's a predatory behavior.
It is a predatory behavior.
So what can we do to help young women, how can they diffuse situations, how can they avoid situations, and then afterwards, I guess, how can we help them if they can't stop it?
Diffusing and avoiding are parts of the advice that we've had for so long that place responsibility for stopping the situation on the victims. And so I'd like to kind of leap over that a little bit, because if someone is predatory toward me, there's not much I can do to stop that.
Okay.
So I'd like instead to think about, once one is victimized, what can we do? And first thing, number one, call SACIS. I cannot say that loudly enough or clearly enough. If a student comes to me and says, Jeanie, a lot of times what they say is, I think I was raped. They don't even want to claim it, there's so much shame. And the first thing I say to them after I say to them, this is not your fault, I believe you, I'm listening, is, Can we call SACIS? Would you like to call SACIS? SACIS is there for you. I just can't say enough about what SACIS does for our community and how important it is that right here on our campus we have a rape crisis center. Most places would just do anything to have that, so I think that's really important. Students on our campus have 3 arenas through which to report a sexual assault. The first one is the police, and of course if the assault happens on campus property, it's campus police. If it happens in the city, it's city police. And police will investigate as a crime this situation. The second way is the Office of Student Standards. Sexual assault is not only a crime, it's also a violation of the Student Code of Conduct. So if the assaulter is a student, the victim can go to the Office of Student Standards and file a report, and they will investigate that separately from the police. They can happen at the same time, or it can be 2 separate things. And the Office of Student Standards can determine whether or not the student assaulter violated the Code of Conduct, and if so, there can be academic sanctions, perhaps even expelling the person from the university. And then the third way is sexual assault is also a violation of Title IX, which is the federal law guaranteeing gender non-discrimination in education. And you can file a Title IX report through the Office of Civil Rights and Diversity, and that's a separate investigation. And some people do all 3, and some people do combinations, and they do them at different times, or they do them together, and that's okay.
Is there legally and reasonably, is there a statute of limitations involved in rape?
That's a good question. I don't know what the statute of limitations
You know, I've
is.
heard different things about that, so I guess I'm reluctant to name a specific thing, but I think it's a pretty long time before that runs out.
But I mean, if you were assaulted by a friend or an acquaintance last year, and you're just coming to terms with the realization that you were victimized.
Absolutely.
Right. And in fact, I think that's one of the things that any kind of legal procedure really needs to take into consideration is the effect of trauma on a victim, because a typical response to trauma is to block it out. And so, for example, sometimes people feel reluctant to go forward and make a report because they say, my memory of the event is sketchy, and how can that be? I don't even trust my own memory. Well, you know, the mind is a wonderful thing, and it works hard to protect us from painful experience. And so sometimes we, even during the midst of a very horrible ordeal, we block parts of it out, and there's parts we may never remember or have detail of, which makes it difficult for law enforcement because that's what they're operating on.
I was going to say, after a certain period of time, and a very short period of time at that, it becomes a he said, she said situation.
Well, from the beginning it becomes a he said, or she said, or whatever the gender pronouns need to be.
He said, whatever.
He said, yes.
You know,
Right.
So that would make it difficult.
Well, and the other thing about that is not only does the effect of trauma have an impact on the memory of the event, it also impacts the person's experience of themselves as a victim. And as we've said several times, to be the victim of a crime at the hands of someone that you knew and trusted, it can take a long time before you're able to come to terms with that and see yourself as a rape victim. And I think one great thing that I've seen about our women today is they're strong, they're capable women, and they don't like to think of themselves as a victim from
And
that
I think that's a
standpoint
positive
either.
move of the women's movement in the last 20 years.
Absolutely.
True, but there are many things about the trauma of the experience that can make the reporting process really difficult, including there needs to be a kind of open-ended envelope during which the victim can come forward and decide to report. You know, at SACIS, we have many, many more people who are clients of ours who come for counseling than we do who want to go ahead and make a police report. You know, our percentage of those who actually make the police report is pretty small. And we support people in whatever they choose to do. I mean, obviously, we'd love to put all these guys behind bars, gals, whoever is doing that behind bars, but we don't want to further traumatize the victim by insisting that our agenda become their agenda.
You know, just really quickly too, I think one thing that's important to say is, and one thing I say to people who have come to me with stories of assault is, if you're not ready to report this to someone else now, tell it to someone you can trust. Call the SACIS hotline and tell them as many details as you can. Come to me and tell me the details. Your mom, a close friend, somebody, because if you share that story with someone else, then down the road, those details will be there for you because someone else will have them for you.
So we're running out of time, and I could talk about this for a whole lot longer. But
Absolutely.
you mentioned some of the different procedures. There's the legal. There's the student behavior standards. Is that system more efficient or less efficient in handling these sorts of things?
I don't think efficiency is different for
Okay,
the
I don't have the right
two.
word.
Right,
Yeah.
but here's what I think. I think that the standard of guilt in a criminal case is different than the standard of guilt in a student standards case. And that's why a lot of people go from one to the other depending. I also think that going to student standards can be really good in a situation where, say, I've been assaulted and the assaulter is in one of my classes and it's affecting my ability to concentrate in class, to have this person sitting just 3 rows over from me. Student standards can help with that. And so that's why the two different sort of avenues of report are very important.
But it's very hard on the victim to get the sense that she or he is going to be believed when there is no actual evidence, there is no proof that it happened, and the person who did it is going to be claiming they didn't do it or it was consensual. That's really hard.
We only have a minute. Is there often, the women who, or the person who gets sexually assaulted, the perpetrator probably has assaulted others too.
Yes.
So is that a case where you can, if you come forward, you can identify those people better?
Well, we like to say that's why it's a good idea to make a police report, so that even if you don't end up going through with it, the police have that information on file.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's a tough situation we find ourselves in. I feel for anybody who feels coerced and forced into having any sort of facing any sort of situation they don't. And I hope we are grown up enough to start dealing with this problem as adults.
Well, thank you
So
for bringing it to
Thank you very
light.
much, Jeanie Ludlow, a PhD, Professor of English and Women's Studies, and Donna Hudson, the Adult Counselor, SACIS, the Assault Counseling and Information Service. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you for watching At Issue.
Thank you.